I'm here with Stefan Kunz, and
Hey guys.
he is on the other side of the world from me, so it is bright and early for him, and it's getting late here, but it's kind of perfect timing, the only time that this will actually work for both of us. And I'm super excited to have him here and to introduce him to all of you guys. So hopefully you'll enjoy this chat. I know it's a topic that a lot of us struggle with, and that is composition. So just before we start, I want to remind everybody, just please hold your questions. We'll have a chance at the end for you guys to ask them. So we're going to go over some of the ones that were pre-submitted earlier in the Facebook group. But if you have any that you come up during the conversation, just hold them to the end and you will get a chance to ask them. But for now, yeah, welcome, Stefan.
Thank you. Hey guys.
So for anybody who magically doesn't know who you are, can you just explain who you are and what you do and kind of how you got into all of this?
So my standard answer would be always, hey, my name is Stefan Kunz. I'm a lettering artist from Zurich. At the moment, I live in Australia, so the other side of the world. And yes, it's just super early. I just got out of bed, had my coffee, which is grateful for you guys because otherwise I would be kind of grumpy. My background is, well, I actually learned to work in a bank, so I'm a Swiss banker. Fit all the cliches. The only thing I don't do is I don't know how to make chocolate. But I've been drawing all my life, and like on the side, always loved filming, then photography, and kind of moved back to lettering and drawing, and it just happened by accident and surprise to me that I'm actually drawing again and doing what I do right now as a full-time job. So it's been really fun. The last 2 years have been crazy. The last 3-4 months have been really crazy, and I'm excited to get on a break, on a holiday, to rest a little bit, and then hopefully the next half year will be as exciting as the first half year.
So what does your day-to-day look like right now? Like what kinds of things are you working on most, and what does your world look like at the moment?
Um, so because I'm trying, like I wouldn't say I was like close to burnout, but I was just like overloaded a little bit. Like I was on a 6 week trip that just took everything away, and I had to kind of adjust to the thinking of like, hey, you should take trips a little bit shorter. But usually my day to day would look like that. I would get up, have some coffee, do my emails, because even if you're a lettering artist, your job is not going to be 100% drawing. It's sad to say so. But then I usually do emails, try to answer as much as I can, see what else I have to do, check my Instagram, check my social media platform, see what's happening there. And and then in the best case, I wouldn't go on Pinterest. I wouldn't go on any platform, but just think of something that I want to do and come up with a quote or something. And then I have my chalk wall just here in the background. And so I like to come up with something that I feel like, hey, this could be actually something interesting to do. And because that has usually stopped me of creating, because I'm always like overthinking the process of like, yeah, is it cool enough? So I'll probably just stop and then say like, hey, the goal is to create something today, even if it sucks. And and then just keep on going. But then really depends on if I have projects that I have to work on, which was the case in the last couple of months. I would start drawing, I would start working out, like try to figure out step by step what I have to do. And what helped me a lot lately is, because I work mostly from home, is to go out to a cafe and change scenery. And so during the day, I'll probably change scenery like 2 times a day, just so I'm more able to work longer, because every time you change scenery, you're in a new environment, you just can focus better. And so what I'll have to do today is finish editing some wedding pictures. So that's my last job that I had. And so it really changes from day to day what I have to do.
So how does your photography relate to your lettering? Like how does that all intertwine?
So, because I started out taking pictures before, and like my how I got started with lettering and was that I use an app called Over, and so I was able to use over as a way to put in type onto a picture. And so I used my pictures that I took taken with either my phone or my DSLR, and then use that text to blend in and just to make that happen. And that's how kind of Typo X Photo appeared. It's just because I love the mix of both. And so when I started out, I love to do these shots when I was traveling, to go on the highest building or somewhere where you can see the skyline, and then put in my the name of the city in the skyline. And so just kind of mixing that in, and learning more about photography helped me to kind of know what I wanted for lettering. And so until the point where it was kind of like the app was what limited my ability to create, that's when I actually started drawing. And so that's how I got into lettering about 4 years ago. I didn't know actually that lettering was a thing. I just thought of like, hey, the only way to draw or to make something more creative or to keep on creating is to start drawing it. And so I started drawing it. I didn't know that other people were doing it. At the time, there were no YouTube tutorials. I felt like there was nothing around to teach me about that. So I taught myself, and I usually teach myself everything that I know. That's the best way that I can learn and process my thinking. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I got into the whole mixing, and photography helps me even now, like helps me to come up with how I can capture what I want to write. So my chalkwall pieces, I love to kind of mix the message of the chalkwall with a Photoshop photo edited picture. So like the grass is greener where you water it. So having my friend water her floor and then put like grass inside and just photoshopping the whole thing just helped me to already see that in my mind and then project that onto whatever I work on.
I've totally seen those chalk ones you're talking about, and I find
Yeah.
those so cool. And I've always thought like the photography side totally helps you because it's so cool to see
Yeah.
those ones. So I want to talk more about your creative process in a second, but just before we get there, you mentioned that kind of the technology limited you a little bit with that app you were using. So can we
Mhm.
talk a little bit about what technologies you are using, what your favorite kind of tool? I know the iPad is for
Yeah.
sure up there, but anything else, like any of your favorite tools, your favorite apps and stuff?
Um, so definitely the iPad with Procreate. They're kind of the go-to apps that I use. I still think like you can do everything with paper, everything that doesn't limit you, and everything will limit you to a certain point. But until you reach that, you really have to work a lot. Like I would have to work like probably like 50 years on Photoshop till I reach the limits of Photoshop, and I have to figure out like, all right, now I gotta switch it up, and until that point, like until I reach that point, Photoshop will do something else. But yeah, what I love to use as well is the Pentel Touch. It's a super fun brush tip pen. Um, and it's small. It's super easy for beginners. It's great for sketching. It's great for just filling out pieces and going at it. And like I try to carry a sketchbook wherever I go, but I still would probably use the iPad to draw. And a question I've been getting a lot lately was like the tool I use to sketch or to draw up ideas. And a lot of people saw that when I presented like my airport pitch that I did, and that was using Paper 53. It's a cool app. It's super to take notes and just to write down stuff. The tools are super limiting, and so this is probably the only time that I'll say is great to limit yourself as well, because if you have all the abilities that Procreate is giving you, then it's hard to limit yourself to how perfect something can be. And with paper, I'm really able to narrow down and just to keep it simple and fast, and not dive into perfection and just try to go deeper and deeper and deeper, but just really just to scratch the surface of like, this is good enough, this is exactly what it's for. And so I love to even use that for presentations. So whenever I do a presentation, I'm really bad at like being like I procrastinate on presentations a long time, and one of my goals this year is to create a TED Talk. So I've been working on that the last couple of weeks, just to like day by day like try to do a little bit. And that app is really great to just create presentation sliders and creates fun lettering with that.
Cool. Okay, so I want to go back to one thing you said, and you said this is good enough. So I think that's like the perfect transition into talking about your creative process, because your whole thing is to create something today, even if it sucks.
Yeah.
And I did get a question beforehand from someone in the Facebook group, and I'm going to pop it up on the screen because it was a good question. She asked, what do you use as inspiration to create something every day?
So we just had a quick talk before, and I was saying like every day it's a dangerous word. If you use every day, it's something that will push you to like you cannot switch off. And when do you reach the goal of every day? It's really hard. If you think about that, setting your goal to something like I have to do something today, and if I did it today, then I've reached a goal. Then I can feel like excited and happy. But every day will always push you to like, oh, I got to do it tomorrow. I got to do it this and this and this day. And so what I like to do, on the other hand, is limiting myself to like a 30-day challenge. So many of you may know that I do a 30 days of Bible lettering challenge, and that came from a 100-day creative challenge that I did. So creating something every day for 100 days, and that's where I probably will tell you like it's a good use of the word every day. Otherwise, you're probably gonna drive yourself into a burnout if you just like are nonstop. So the create something today is great because it just prompts you to not go too high with your expectations, and that's kind of the talk that I want to do is like crippling expectations. We all have a sense of idea in our head that just tells us how something should look like, and that's the problem with myself. Actually, it's like when I think of a lettering piece, I always have already set a limit. And if you're on Instagram, you see everyone else's Instagram pieces. So right now for me it's Gemma O'Brien. It's like she creates these massive murals, she creates these crazy illustration colorful murals, and for me that's kind of like, oh, I really want to reach that. So my expectation is here and my abilities are here, and so that gap is always the thing that keeps us pushing, which is great. But at the same time, it's that gap as well. If that gap is too big, it will also drive us to not do anything, to give us excuses like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do something like that in a day. And the same thing with film. If I tell you like, hey, can you do a film? Like your idea of film is probably going to be Hollywood, but even now today, we've dropped it a little bit with YouTube. But even creating a YouTube video, like a YouTube video as you would see it with a lot of YouTubers doing it, you'd see it's highly edited, it's highly worked on. They have a YouTube script, they have everything, and so the entry level for that is it's high. So the expectation is here, and the bigger the gap, the more it will cripple you to not create. And so that's why I pushed on to say like, hey, I want to create something today, even if it sucks. Take that gap away and not think about that gap, but just like go ahead. And my past experience from the 100-day creative challenge was, it was just amazing. Like every day something, for me it wasn't about anymore about like how good is it. It's just about how can I get something out. And then sometimes it takes you like 5 minutes. Sometimes it takes you like 8 hours to create something, and the goal is just to like have fun with it as well. And when I have to think about creating something, it's usually I try to look at stuff. I like if I'm in a hole, in a rut, creative rut, I'll just go through my house and just like, what can I do? And I look at everything and look it through the glasses of lettering. So I'm like, I look at a blanket, and instead of just seeing a blanket, I see like, can I create a letter with a blanket? Can I fold it in a way? Or like right now, I'm looking through my room. I see that blanket. I see like a backpack, and I'm like, okay, what do I have in my backpack that I could use to either throw in the air, create something like that, or I don't know. And the more you've trained that, the more you'll be able to figure out ways of using what you have to create something, or what you see, then seeing like, cool, a blanket. Like how I could knit something in a blanket, and And the more ways you actually project onto an idea, the more creative you'll be. And it sounds super easy right now. Like you think like I always have an idea, but do that for 6 days, and after 6 days you're already lost. Like you think like, oh, 100 days, easy. Like I know exactly what I'm gonna do, and I'm the kind of person, I hate doing the same thing over and over again. So I could do things like this here, like this poster that I did. Like I could do something like that every day, where you just fill out a whole page. It's easy. It's not that difficult. But I would get bored in like a couple of days just doing the same thing over and over, and share that. So I kind of want to stay fresh always, and that's why I'll go to that blanket and see like, hey, what could I do with that blanket? Can I do something that nobody else has seen before? And maybe it's not going to be perfect when I do it, but at least I've tried it and I can move on.
So I think it's great because you're create something today versus saying create something every day. It just makes it sound like quicker. It makes it sound like just jump in, see something and do it and don't overthink
Exactly.
it. So
Yeah.
is that kind of the like starting point for your creative process? Like anytime you sit down to do something, is that kind of where your mindset is at?
So my creative process will usually go on 4 steps, and I have that on, for example, my Instagram, on my stories, and I'll show you a if I have it somewhere on my iPad. I think I got it. Just gotta scroll through it a little bit, or not. That's weird. Oh, there you go. Just when you give up. All right. Let me try to switch that around. So, can you see that?
Yep.
Perfect. Um, so my 4 steps usually start with getting inspired. So number one, you need to research, do your research, and get inspired. So you need to find things that inspire you. You need to go on Pinterest, for example. So I usually like to go on Pinterest, and what I will do, and so you have your home screen, and you see like, oh, this type here actually looks pretty sweet. So I just discovered that, and I'm gonna save it. So inspiration is great when you save it. Then, because when you ever need to go back, you'll go in here and you're like, oh, sweet. I found some stuff that I felt like, oh, this is really cool. I love the E on this one here, for example. Just kind of like this toothpaste looking shape here. And then just going in and kind of like, I don't like how it's separated. So I kind of would love to have that all linked, but it's already enough if I have one layer that I really like. And so I keep on getting inspired. I'll have my notebook as well, usually, that I take with me, and I just sketch in things. It doesn't have to be great. It's usually just ideas that come in. So for example, this here, I saw that somewhere, I think, and I just wrote it down, and then I could link that with a word. And that's kind of how you go about it. So the first one is always be on the lookout for inspiration. Do it often. The more you do it, the more regular you do it, the better. Like it's kind of like eating well. If you eat well every day, you're not going to have a problem. But if you only eat at certain times, it's not going to do your body any good. So looking for inspiration on a regular basis, it's gold. And the second one is something that people and artists will usually either not talk about it, or say terrible things about it. So copy and learn. And I really mean it just in the sense of copy and learn. Don't copy anything and post it as your own. Don't copy it and just tweak it a little bit and then post it as your own. Usually try to copy things and keep it like for yourself. It's just for learning's sake. And what I'll do is really I'll take these letters here and I'll copy them. And maybe I have my other sketchbook with me, and I'm only going to show this to you guys. Um, so here, all these pieces here, these are all picked up by things that I've seen. So I might actually find something that um, is from here, or maybe not. For example, this one here, I know this one is from James Lewis. He wrote a piece. He used one of our grids and wrote like "We rise by lifting others," and he had this amazing type that would just go out. And for me, this is a just like, hey, okay, cool. Like, how does it work with the shadows? How does maybe like these pencil brush pieces look like? And so I'll go in, and whenever I'm not feeling like it, I'll try to copy things, pieces, and see how well I can, like, what can I learn from them? Like, is it just the shadows? Is it the way they write it? Is it any piece and form? Then the next one is create, and that one is probably the most important. Is like the creative process. If you don't create, then it's just a process. You gotta create something with what you learn. So you'll go in and you'll try out different ways of, like, with what you've learned, with the techniques you've learned, to implement that. And so that's where you start combining things. And if I show you, let me see how I can move um, my phone around. So if you see this wall here, so I drew all of this here, the lettering, and this came from something that I've prepared. But then you add these forms in, and I've seen that somewhere else. I've worked on this somewhere else, and I've tried it out. And by having tried that out before, I have that in my head. And so going to the last step of the process is one more step, and that one is really important. So after you've created, the way to improve every time on every piece you make is just to add one more step. And so on this piece here, after I had the whole typo on, so you have to imagine just the typo without the circle and without the shapes inside, I had to ask myself, like, what can I add? What can I do to improve that? And that's the fun part, is actually because I added the circle, and then I tried to fill it out with something, and I wasn't sure how to do it exactly. But these pieces, and I'm not sure if it looks better with it or without it. But just having added, I've learned to see, okay, this is how it looks like, and I've had this now on my wall for a couple of weeks, months even, and now I've learned how it looks, and maybe I'll never use it again. Maybe I'll use it again. I don't know. And so this is kind of what I like to do, is like to always try out something new and see, like, how can you step up. So really, inspiration is really key for that, and it will also help you with like pieces like this, where you have to fill out a whole page with words, using like pieces of information that you've had, and then copy and learn. That's how you train. That's how you learn something new. And the same thing is like when you learn something from someone else, you copy kind of what they're doing, what they're teaching you, but you still shouldn't use only that. You have to create your own style, your own piece, and that will come over time. So be patient with that, and then create something every day for a couple of days, weeks, 30 days, or so on, and that's how you're going to progress. But as well as, if you add one piece every time, you'll learn something. And sometimes, in most cases, I've also failed with adding one more step. So
That's what I
like
was
on
going
a
to
chalk,
ask. That's what
yeah,
I was going to ask you.
on a chalk wall, it's easy to erase and just to fix something. But on so I was in Sweden a couple of weeks ago, and there I was drawing on a plexiglass, and in front of 100, maybe 1,000 people that were there. And so while I was drawing, like, I there was nothing that I could erase, because they're acrylic markers, they're permanent. And so every step that I added, or just the one more step that I added, I couldn't erase that, and I wasn't sure if I really was happy about it. But at the same time, it's like, I've tried it and I've learned from it, and all this experience will teach you a lot. So this is why, add one more step, not 10, not 5, just one more, and you'll learn so much. And now the question usually remains is, when do you know what your last step is? And so for me, it's usually when I will step back and I'll like, all right, I like it how it is, and I'll step back. But then I'll usually go back and say, all right, what could I add, or what could I do to add something without destroying it, without just breaking it up, but just add something to try something out. And that's what usually keeps me going, keeps me learning, and always keeps me or helps me to come up with something new. And so that one step I feel is one of the most important things in the sense of going forward. If somebody would present me their work, I'd be looking at it. I'm like, all right, this is amazing. How could you add one more step to it? And like, how could you challenge yourself every time?
I
And
love
so for
that. I love
yeah, and
that. I've
for
never heard that one piece. Well, I mean, I
yeah,
feel like I've thought of that advice before, but not in that like succinct, just add one more step. It's not, it
yeah,
doesn't seem that simple when you go to do it because you're really worried you're going to mess it all up.
yeah. A lot of people, I see a lot of people do it, and they think about that. Well, they don't really think about it in a like they're aware of that decision, but they do it. And for me, the whole breaking down my creative process was all about like figuring out like the each little step and figuring out like why is it important. And so all of these steps don't have to go after one of each other, but it's like it's the whole thing. It's like this will help you to advance. It will help you to learn anything. Like if I learned to do latte art and I love doing coffee. So for me, getting inspired is like looking at other people, what other people are doing with latte art, seeing how they do it, and then learn from them, like learn their techniques, learn how they do it. And that will help me to create my own latte art, to create my own pieces. And then always adding like one more step, like, hey, what if I instead of doing this way, what if I did it that way, or I added this little piece here, and then I learn from that. And usually I learn from mistakes, and that's why people who perfect everything they do, they'll probably not learn what it is that made it perfect, because they just like fixing here and here and here a little bit things, but in the end they don't know what made it that way. But if you made something and you're not happy with it, you're like, well, I know why I'm not happy. Well, you discover maybe the reason why you're not happy. And that's why I'm like, all right, I've learned it. So next time I'll be able to redo that again, and then maybe I'll figure out with the circle and the shapes inside, I can learn something else. I don't know.
So I have one more question. Actually, Cortland from the Facebook group had a good question that goes along with all of this just before we get into the lesson. And there are
Sweet.
more questions that we'll get to at the end. But so she asked, do you ever get all the way to the end of a project and decide to start over? So I want to kind of take this and ask one more thing on top of it. So
Yeah.
when you post stuff on Instagram, I'm sure everyone who sees it goes, oh my God, that's perfect. But are those posts ever ones where you're like, I didn't like the way this one turned out with that one more thing I added? Or do you get to the end of a project or the end of a piece that you're just doing to post on Instagram and you add the one more thing, you don't like it? Do you ever scrap it and restart? Or do you post that and just carry on with it, learn from the mistake? In the interest of complete honesty.
I'm always, it's always about complete honesty. It's, it's really interesting because I've whenever I post something on Instagram, for me it's done. I don't think about it anymore, and usually that's when the switch also happens. It's where I'm like, yeah, I actually like it. But only after I've posted. Before, it's always like, oh, I could change maybe this, maybe that, maybe tweak a little bit here and there, and it's dangerous. It's really dangerous. And the reason why it's dangerous is because unless you have a deadline, you can do it as long as you want. And that's the hard truth about doing Instagram posts as well. It's like, unless I have this challenge of creating something every day, I don't have a deadline set for a piece. So I don't have a certain thing that I have to draw. There's no quote that I need to be drawing, and it's only something that has to come out of me. And that's where I usually stop. So right now there are a couple of things that I would love to do, like because I'm going on a holiday and I want to create this piece like this out of the office. And I wanted to create something a little bit creative, like fun, kind of like, hey, this is awesome. I'm like telling people I'm going to take a break. And talk about why it's important to take a break. But then I'm thinking of like, should I do it on a chalk wall? Should I do it on the iPad? And you have all these possibilities, and so you have endless decisions to take. And for me, usually I end up with like kind of like drifting off. Like I lose the attention of finishing a piece. So there are a couple of projects. There are a lot of projects that I've started where I'm just like, I don't feel it right now, and so let me just do something else, and then I start something new. And I've heard that in the music industry, like musicians do that a lot. They start writing a piece of music and they're like, oh, you know what, let's put that on the side, let's create something new. And in the end they've created like 100 songs almost, but none of them are finished. And it's the same with, I think, every industry. It's like it's hard to really go through every project, but at the same time, the more projects you start and the more projects you forget to end, the more you have like, oh, you know what, I can keep on working on this, and you don't finish things. And so I think for your mind, it's really important to just really finish things and just go on with it. And so that's why posting it on Instagram usually helps me to step off and just like, all right, it's done. It's like, those cooking shows where they're on a timer and they're like, all right, hands up, leave your pans out. It's like nobody touches anything anymore. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
and that really helps. It's really helpful for that. But of course, everything that I post, nothing is perfect, and I'm the biggest critic of myself, and you're going to be of yourself as well. So I'm never going to see all these little intricate details that you see on your posts, and I'll feel like, oh, this is awesome what you've created, and I love it. But you'll be like, yeah, but there's this, and I was struggling with that, and I didn't know how to solve this here, and the whole piece, it just doesn't make sense, and you have those either excuses or these ways of diminishing your work. And I've had to learn that for clients to, number one is don't ever point out mistakes that you think you've made. Um, Let your client tell you about what he thinks is not good, and what he likes or what doesn't like. And so I've even had to learn, number two is to send your client your work earlier before you're happy with it. Because the worst thing is you think you're happy, you send it to your client, and then he suddenly is like, yeah, like, I don't like this. And you're like, what? But I put all my energy and effort just to make it perfect so that I like it. And the idea when you work for a client is they gotta love it. They're paying for it. You are, in a sense, a tool for them. So because they're not the ones who are able to design something, you are the tool that can make that design for them. And the closer, so I like to send out stuff earlier on, way before I actually would say like, hey, this is like, I've perfected it, and then I send it for a review. It's stupid because the review is all about like, hey, what do you like? Let's break it into steps and let's get closer. And you save yourself, I've saved myself a lot of trouble by sending my clients, so it's like, hey, this is a draft, it doesn't look great. I don't tell them. It's like, hey, what do you think? And then they're like, yeah, I love this and this, and you're like, oh, I didn't think you'd love that, so cool, I know that. And if the client is happy, that's when you know your work, you've done your work. And because a happy client, they will recommend you, and they will tell their friends about like, hey, this guy is awesome, he did everything we wanted to. And you might be thinking like, but yeah, I didn't really enjoy the way it looked. It's like, in total honesty, it's really not about you, it's about the client and the one who's paying for it. And same with you. If you want someone to design your website, you want them to do what you want because you're paying for them and not what they want to do. So it's, yeah, you learn a
Yeah.
lot of that.
I think we could talk about the client work side of it for a long time too. So maybe
Oh
that's
yeah.
a topic for another day. But I love what you're saying about just having it done. And one of my favorite quotes actually, and I find it really relates to Instagram, is just done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
So I mean, if anyone's listening to this and thinks that we don't suffer from that, it really
I
is.
had
So
someone tattoo this quote that I drew, done is better than perfect, at the tattoo on his ankle. So I'm like, whoa. He sent me a picture afterwards, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
I think some people need it like on their forehead or right on
Oh
their
yeah.
hand while they're writing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked for about half of what the amount of time we've allotted for this is. So I think we really need to get into the actual meat and potatoes of this conversation, which is you teaching us about composition because you are the master of
Sweet.
composition.
Well,
So
I
you're going to show us on the iPad?
I am.
Okay.
So it really doesn't matter if you're using paper or anything else. It works perfectly. There are certain things like tools that I'm going to be using, like Procreate brushes or just a composition builder, the composition builder that's a Procreate brush, but also just the pre-composed grids that I use. Those, you can print those out, you can use them as well. We've seen people be super creative on how they use it, and so I love to talk a little bit about how the best way that or the idea we had or I had with the grids and how it came to be.
Cool. Okay, so I've popped up the URL where people can go and find those grids. So it's just your website/shop, correct?
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
perfect. So yeah, if anyone wants to check out what Stefan's about to show us, then that's where you can find them. But I'll let you just jump right in, and I'll keep my mouth shut for a little
All
while.
right, I'm gonna
Okay.
switch to the other camera and boom. All right, I hope you guys can see this well. Just gonna adjust. You see, this is Australia. You have a heater here while my blanket is over there, and yeah, it's super cold. It's at on the highest level right now. So whenever I need to heat up my hand, I'll just put my hand over the heater. Let me see. Ooh, I can zoom in. Awesome. All right. So when we start with composition, so usually the way I would do something is I would actually start with a quote. So let's see. I have like even saved up quotes that I love to use. Um, so for example, be bold, do it right, live epic. It's nice, but I have some quotes here, like quotes for lettering. Um, and I could be here, like is gonna like. Do what is right, not what is easy. I love that quote. I think I'll use this for an example. So we have even two ways of doing something. And if you want to, you can also check out like quotes. Whenever you need quotes for lettering, you can simply go on my Pinterest at pinterest.com/Stefan Kunz, and you'll find all my my quotes, my inspiration, and you can save some for yourself as well. It's also a really great tool to not always read through 1,000 books to come up with a new quote. So this is kind of the starting point where you have to go, like you have a quote that you're using, and here you go, do what is right, not what is easy. And so on a piece of paper, I'll probably write that down, and now I'm just gonna, so these are usually the things you have to go through on the iPads. So do what is right, not what is easy. So already when you write something out, you already kind of learn about um, the words that are in. So I already see like there's two times what is, and so immediately that kind of sucks for me because it's like you're writing two times the same thing, and it's kind of the same word structure on two lines. So we can either split that up, do what is right and not what is easy. So I'm maybe just going to focus on the first part here. And this is why it's important to write that down, kind of focus on what words are important and see how you kind of structure it. And because I came from a background of using overs, so this is that app here, you can simply tap on, well, I'm not going to use this kind of picture. So somewhere you can use, for example, a picture, and you can just add like text. And so this is kind of how it started off, is like hello, and then you have to kind of like, how do you position it, where do you position it in the picture, and how like do you integrate it. Like you could fill out the whole piece, and this is where I got stuck with, it's kind of like it's just straight, it's just normal, it doesn't change a lot. So I came from this thing of where I have words and I can just reposition them and I can just move them around as however I want. And I see that this here is moving a little bit. Oops. Here we go. Oh, My tripod is moving a little bit. Sorry for that. Should be better now. All right. So back to the creating part. So now you're stuck with the how do I use that? Like how can I write something with that? So you can either start, and this is what I've been previously doing, is like usually go in like why not just write it out in different ways, do what is right, and again, there's no right, there's no wrong, there's just like plenty of options you can do, and immediately like, all right, this like there's a gap here, there's a gap over there, and you kind of need to balance it all out. So going back again, I'll be probably going a straight line, like what happens if we stack those words on top of each other. So always using this as the middle line, do, and then see if I can use those shapes maybe to add something in the middle between it is, and I don't know, half circle something around. So the middle letter here would be to add the G in the middle there, and then right. So as you can see, this balancing out, kind of adding these same gaps everywhere around, already helps you to make a composition that feels light and feels well adjusted. So now if we go out and we go to the, here we have a ton of different grids. So for example, I'm gonna go through them, and this is where if you're looking for inspiration and looking for like what kind of grid could I use, so you can, for example, use this one. So do what is right. So you already have something here, and this is where it's super easy, where you can just fill something out. So you can just go in, and then you can, for example, use the full gap. And so here's kind of the middle. So you have what is a 4-letter word, which is great.
And so, Stefan, just for anyone who's watching, just to be totally clear, these grids that he's using here are the ones that are for sale on his website that I linked to earlier.
Exactly.
But before we hopped on, I think it was before, it might have been earlier in this conversation. But you were talking about how you use these grids, when you're starting out and you're trying to get like a feel for how to do layouts. But for you in your head, like these grids are just kind of built in as part of your memory bank now, right? Like you don't necessarily need to always use them.
Exactly. So if I would go over a piece that I've already done, and maybe not a piece that I see immediately that I've done with these grids, but maybe earlier pieces, like even this one, let it snow, let it grow. It's the composition grid. It's kind of like this here. So you would have, maybe just have to delete something here. You'd see like there's, first of all, there's this hexagon, this 6-sided piece here, and then you have the word here that goes in here. It just fills these sides, and the same thing here. So it kind of fills out the whole piece, and it's already in a grid of sorts. If I go even further to, so this one is for the online course I did. So there's something not quite right with this one. It's probably not the end one, but as you can see, if I draw out the composition, you'll see all these elements. And kind of keeps that here. So if I hide everything else, you can see like this is kind of what I see. So here you could write anything else in it as well. So going in, you'd be like let's say love, what you
Create.
oh, Even better. Exactly. So as you can see already, this layout already helps me to create something, and it's super easy. It's super fast. It's something, and that's why it's copying is not the greatest way to do something. And this is why I created these grids. And I'll just have to go around again just to put that out. It's always
So,
the worst. Yeah.
so Stefan, someone's asking how this would translate to paper. So if you're not experienced with those grids, like and I would imagine that if somebody bought your grids and could see them, you could still use them on paper. Like you're just not, you have to draw the grids out yourself, but you get the inspiration from them.
All right. Let me show you how I would do it on paper and how I have done it on paper. Um, so if you have a screen, like you can either print them out, but if you do it, it's not going to work perfectly right now. But I'm just have to bring the brightness up all the way. But as you can see, I can go through it a little bit, and so I can draw it out here.
But yeah, these grids you have are not only for Procreate. Like you can print them out and use them on paper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can use them in Photoshop. It's also great for Photoshop. You can even use them on your phone with Over. It's just a little bit a hassle to create a little bit around that. But then as soon as you have it on paper, like I have right here, so this is kind of how you can print it out. You can choose the size how you want to print it. And the next thing is you put something over here. And what did I write? People who love to eat are always the best people. It's true. It's true. True facts. And so here I could be like, all right, like here I wrote everything pretty much in a normal like block letters. Here a little bit of script, so I can change that up. I can go around and just go in people, and you can see here how I just transfer the style. I just use these as guidelines. Who love, and now I can maybe make that one bigger, maybe even go around like here the L. And so this is where creativity comes along, is like I know that I can go with the bow of the V, I can go on top of the E, and here maybe of the L I can go underneath it. And so you already start to play around, and that P here could be perfect for that gap in this section. And so on. And so while you're drawing, you try to always kind of like play around, and you see lines are not perfect, are always. And this is where like these grids are just amazing, and I still use them, even though like I know exactly how to make them. I know exactly how to to come up with compositions on my own. The best people, and you can like it's still super helpful whenever you're like not sure of creating something, and this is just a great starting point, because right now I'm like, all right, I love how this thing here goes over the under the O. This one goes over the O. Maybe I'll actually go further down with the P, and I'll slant that one as a little bit as well. Have the L maybe come over there, and then I can fit the who just a little bit beneath it. And you see, there are a lot of decisions you're going to take while you're drawing. And then the next thing is you go with a new piece of paper on top of it, and you're like, all right, so now I can go back again, and I can restart this whole process. Um, and maybe I'm not going to do the bow over this one, just going to do that. And you start adding all these elements to it. You're like, hey, how about I create a serif style here, and I add these pieces up there, and so on. And so this is how you get started with, like, when you're stuck or you're just starting out with composition. it's really all about filling out these pieces, these blocks, and kind of sticking to those lines in the first, like at first, but then start to imagine like, how can I move out of these blocks? How can I draw around these? Um, so that when you take this away, you're like, all right, so it still doesn't look perfect. I got to work on that. And that's when you start to like use the space that you have. And that's really important in composition, is that you use the space you got and make it feel like it's in a balance between all sides, and it doesn't have like holes. So you might have to fill out the love a little bit more. You might have to add some flourishes left and right to kind of fill those gaps out. And so going further, it's like, it's okay not to be okay. It's kind of the same thing. It's I had this one here before, and you can see like I've added these flourishes on here, and on my grids, pre-composed grids, you get like some tips that you have, like add flourishes, make the grid fit your needs. Don't have the grid, like you have to get into the grid and make it fit to what it is, but really to what you feel it is. And so when
That
you
sort
take
of
that away,
that sort of answers a question that just came up. Actually, someone was asking. She said, "This might sound silly, but as I look at this, I feel like I'd have difficulty figuring out which quotes to use. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it seems tricky to find quotes with the right number of short and long words in the right places."
absolutely, this is why there are so many grid packs. I've not stopped at one grid pack. They're like, not, there's not a grid that will fit every need. So there are plenty of grids, and hopefully, I'll keep on creating, and the more you have, the better chances you have at finding something that will fit your quote. So if we go back to the quote that I was trying to write, it's like, do what is right. I'll have to see where my pencil is. There it is. Um, So I'll go in like I was here, and maybe there's one piece that I'm not using, and maybe I like, if I take that away, I'm like, all right, cool, looks kind of all right. Maybe I can change that up. Maybe I can actually use this and turn that around. So I would go in, and I would maybe, and that's the easy part with Procreate, is you can easily turn things around and make it fit what you need best. So that's really helpful. But then again, the next part would be, as soon as you feel like, you know what, I have this sketch, I have how it should look like, and so maybe this is kind of what I want, but I want kind of what is kind of like this, kind of like more this, I don't know the shape name, um, but have something like here, and again, maybe just have right written beneath it. So you see, I'm really just like, just, it has to be a little bit illustrated, and a lot of that stuff happens in my head. The more you do it, the easier we'll get with how you will see things. So for example, I want to write do in a script form, so I'll have that here. And if you've sketched that out, if you're like more advanced in lettering, and you're already like, all right, I know kind of how I want things to be. So the is kind of like shaped like that, and then right. Then the next step would be to see like, all right, does that kind of look nice? Maybe the T has to go a little bit further out because there's a whole gap in here. So this gap isn't really aware, or like isn't on this side. So to balance it out, maybe I have to do things like that. Maybe, and then you'll try out something new. It's like, what if um, it was a text, like a script piece? I'm like, then I would have to change the do. So usually what I will try to do is to mix one form with the other. So it's like, it's block letter script, block script, or just script to lighten something up, or just to focus on something. So here the word that I would want to focus is right instead of what, actually. So I might just do it a little bit smaller. But then again, you can go into the other tool that I have is a grid builder. And that one is, you have all these tools and you can just, I have to put that on. And that's where you probably will use Procreate or Photoshop or something like that. And you can say like, all right, you place them on top of that, and those will help you just to draw something easier. So like the next step after I've drawn this piece here is to perfect it. And so what I'll do here is create these grids, my personal grid, and then add these elements to just create the piece that I wanted to do. And so, for example, here, boom, boom. Then I'll just align it at the middle, and keep finishing that. So whenever I want to finish this piece, so now I have kind of the grids. I kind of know the distances better, because I can, like, these are really helpful to draw in. So I know, for example, that if I go back to my brush right here, I kind of know, like, okay, the eye, to make it straight, and then I can fill this one out. I can go in, whoops, I was drawing it on the wrong layer, but that's all right. Like, I can use this to kind of help me guide, like, where my eye has to go, and just to make it like straight, and that it works in that frame. So right now here is what I will do to create my own grid. And going back to a piece that I've made not too long ago, let me see, ba-ba-bum. I think it was on here. So you can see here, too much Monday, not enough coffee. So I've already kind of like built my grids around that. So now I can know, like, I can build these grids, and then I can redraw the whole piece afterwards without too much hard work, because I could draw on top of that grid again, and it would fit perfectly, probably. Like, these are just the guidelines that will help you to draw in. And this is how kind of would start off with composition, to draw these out. And you can see that well with Ian's work, with my work. Then when you hide this layer, you see, like, the forms are straight. It works in the line, and it's a helpful tool to guide that. But then as soon as you've gone through all these steps where you've, like, sketched up a few examples, and you come up with a few different compositions, and I'm trying to not this one here. See, like right here, you can see they all are built on kind of these grids. They all have these straight lines, and because to perfect it in the end, you kind of have to be sure that it is in a line, that it's not crooked, that it's not kind of, that it follows a form and shape, and that it has some symmetry in it. So, like, the whole thing is aligned perfectly, that it doesn't feel like it's, if you would put a pin in it, like, that it would straight off, like, balance in one side or not. And so this way, like here, it starts from a circle, and doing that with a grid that is already built, or, like, put that into a circle, and you'll see, like, I can see right now that this piece here is a little bit sided to the left. So I would have to correct that, and that's where I would probably use my grid builders, or just create a circle and draw that around, just to make that look perfectly. And that's kind of how I would start.
So, Stefan, someone had asked earlier, I'm going to pop it up on the screen here. Stephanie asked, for those of us that don't have an iPad Pro, what are your tips for getting things centered? So it looks like your tip is just to still use those grids and make sure that you know exactly where the center is of what you're starting.
Well, if you don't have an iPad, that's not a problem. Like all of these were drawn not on the iPad. You
Right.
probably won't see, like on a trained eye, you'd see that this here is not perfectly aligned. And even if like I could use another piece of paper, or I can just redraw the same thing. Like I could really redraw the same piece here, and what I would do is like I'll get a line. I'd try like to have a centered line, and then create like try to create a perfect circle. Like you can use perfect shapes, and I'm usually the kind of guy who's like, this is already good enough. Like there's certain imperfection that you'll always have, and you can avoid when you work with the grids, and it makes it easier. But doesn't that have to mean that it's the only way you can do something? So the same way, it's just the principles are really helpful to know, and you'll learn that while using the grid tools. Like even my grid packs are not all perfectly centered, um, but they are like I would probably use these lines, and it becomes really geometrical when you think about that. Is how you position them. So again, I would go in, I'd see like, all right, this is where this shape has to go. Um, and so on. And then I would start to rebuild that shape. And the better I build it, the better it works. And you would even see on my chalk wall, let me see if I can turn around. You can see those lines. But where's my finger? There it is. You can see those lines. Like it all is built on these lines, and I've tried to erase some of them, but you can see on top and beneath it, these help me to draw in the letters a lot better. And so this whole piece is actually made from a grid. So you have these pieces here, you have the one shape, and the circle was put in just right after. And so that's kind of how you start off, but it's all about centered, and that's where I start with the center. I start when you have to come up with pieces, and that's usually how you start off. It's like this whole kind of yin and yang where you start off with balancing things out. So when you think of the yin and yang sign, it's kind of like it's perfectly balanced wherever you put something on, and starting off with a shape. So this is where, if you're on paper or whatever you're using, I would start off with either a circular shape, a square, maybe a triangle, diamond shape, and from there on you can like add stuff. And so you go like, hi, this works perfectly, and then you kind of feel like out like what your name is, and you see like you start to build a shape out of that, and these shapes really help you to kind of create something in it, so that it looks from the outside like, as you can see here again, it's in an almost circular shape. This kind of oval, and so on, and even now that take this, like this is a postcard. It kind of goes after a shape. Like it's a mountain here, it's a square, it's all filled in a square, so it will always work. So the piece that I had behind me, the where you just fill out a whole piece of paper, like you can, like a composition could be filling out a whole piece of paper and filling out the other side, and then you have a composition, but inside it can be messy. The goal here is to eliminate all the little spaces. So what I like to do is add stippling everywhere. I like to or add decorative ornaments, elements like that, just to fill out these little spaces. And try and see if I find something else.
Yeah, that's actually another good question we had. Kathy asked, how do you make sure everything is aligned in the middle, which we covered, but she also asked, how do you make sure you fill out the empty spaces? So do you have any other examples in there of kind of little things you throw in?
So yeah, let me see if I can. I love to show it by examples. For example, here in this one, what I did is kind of like try to feel like always have the same amount of space everywhere. So between these gaps here, it's always about the same space. And so either you use the letters, like the ligatures, and you kind of fill that out. And now here, up here, there still is a little bit of space, but it's not visible because there's no word on top of it that holds up. And even here, like the ligature of the E just goes all the way over, covers that. So it's kind of nice, and so forth. So that's for this one. Here, it's kind of the whole banner that goes around. So I've tried to fill out the space from the crate and the socks up here, and try to fill out these elements. Kind of see, like, as you can see, like you can turn this all the way around. It wouldn't change too much of the shape because it's kind of like mirrored from this point on here. Like this banner goes about the same way that this banner goes up. So mirroring, balancing it out, it's just something pleasing to the eye. So if you learn, and that comes from the whole photography side, if you center something in the middle, it will look kind of nice and laid out evenly. And you get all these rules of 3/3 and so on that you can learn from, that will help you to figure those things out. Let me see if I have others example here. For example, this one here, like I used kind of like these illustrated elements to fill it out, or these little pieces here in between, just to add a little bit of a general feel, so it looks kind of like equally all spaced, and even like having some dots on left and right. And you'll see that in a lot of pieces. Here it's those stars. So if I would remove, let's see if I can remove those stars. Oh yeah. So if I remove those stars, you probably see those gaps a lot better. I hope you can see that really well. You can see those gaps a lot better that are here, and just the whole thing looks so dense. So a little way to distract that, and that's why I'm telling you always add one more step, is because that will help you to learn these things. So because of adding those stars, it a little bit distracts you from the thing that it's so dense here, because it weighs out a little bit more. And that's one great way to do that. Something here is like these little flourishes left and right from "We Are God's Masterpiece." So one way is like I've actually mirrored the flowers. So they are two flower elements in here, and then I just added these pieces here to kind of, again, like make the load easier from God's, because this here helps to kind of like ease the, like it gives you a little of gradient to nothing. So it's not just like a dot that's hard and that's harsh, and it balances kind of the weight out.
Those are all super helpful. People are saying they need an app that just does filler stuff like that for them.
It's really trying out. Like I still feel like I'm terrible with like ornaments, with filling out those gaps, but the more you do it, the better you get. And that's why, like, do it even if it sucks. Make it happen. Like these bubbles, it was the idea for the water, to make that look pretty nice. But it also added the thing that it's not so harsh than the harsh light on top. So it's kind of easier down here. It's harder up there, and it's a nice opposite thing that happens here.
So speaking of like just kind of trying things and learning different styles, I've had a couple questions about how to, I mean, I feel like you have a huge repertoire of different styles for the actual letters. But how did you build that up? Like, where did you get your inspiration for different, I don't want to say fonts because they're hand drawn, but for different styles?
Let me just quickly get something. You got to entertain people quickly for like 2 seconds. I'll get something.
Okay. Entertainment. Yay. I'm trying to think of a dad joke right off the top of my head. What do you call A wolf who can meditate. First person to answer this question in the chat wins, even if it's after Stefan comes back.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
I think it's really funny that you're wearing sandals, even if it's cold there. Oh, it's not back on yet.
All right, I'm almost back.
I was just saying, I think it's funny that you're wearing sandals, even if it's so cold there.
Oh yeah. Well, it would be colder to just wear nothing. It's maybe not be the best idea here, but like I even have a mattress to cover up my window because insulation is so bad. All right, so these are my secret journals. So this is kind of how I started like taking note. Like I used to read like one chapter of the Bible every morning, and took like notes, like kind of like a summary of something. So this is even in German, and it kind of progressed from here on. And you can see like I started like experimenting with fonts. It was still really straight, and this is kind of how I started out. Like, you see, just trying something out. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to go somewhere. And those were somewhere even sermon notes. And I kept on drawing and drawing. And then I think like doing that every day, and that's where I did the 100-day creative challenge, was to really start doing that a lot more. So see, this is a early composition that I did before, and like letters are not perfect. They're all like the whole composition. Even for me right now, I would see like, ooh, this is terrible. Like there's a gap in between here. There's it's all not as well put out. Like this one, I wouldn't want to show you that, but like it just, you can see how you develop over time. And so right now, it just evolves and evolved and evolved. And then there's this whole book here. This is kind of the extension from the last one. So you can see I have 100 pages full of text. And this is where I started like script letters, or sans serif letters, script letters, adding elements. And that's kind of how I dissected the whole piece of how do you create letters. And this is how this style came along. So what I've learned here from doing that over and over again, like putting hundreds of hours, is actually learning this style that I've used for this campaign. It's filling out pieces, and I've became so at ease with drawing so many letters and so kind of different styles is just because you learn like, hey, this is a serif style with some elements in it. This is just a normal sans serif with an inline with a 3D shadow. Here it's just with a gradient, and you learn kind of like all the ingredients of every single font, or single style, and you know kind of how you can mix them, how you can add on top of them. And this is where I learned like how to space things right and how to fill out pieces. So this helped me a lot to come over get over the fear of like having a long text to write. Like you could give me a, I don't know, 3,000 word text, and I'll find a way to draw it somewhere. And this is kind of how you do it. It's really like testing it out. And then I went on Pinterest and like added these to my notes. So where like this is probably something that I saw on Pinterest, and I was like I wasn't inspired anymore. So I like, hey, madman. So like kind of make this crazy type. And I've tried to add stuff like that into it every time. And the more I do it now, that's kind of how I do things. It's like just trying to get from this to kind of this, where it's like it's completely different, but it's over time. You just learn and you get better, and adding one more step every step of the time. That's kind of how you do things.
I've found that the smaller you do it too, the less overwhelming it feels. Like you feel like each word doesn't have to be so perfect. Yeah. I started doing that on a much less wordy scale than you did. But when I was on my trip, I was doing a journal like that where I was trying to do all different styles. And actually, I have it right beside me, and I pulled up my Zurich one for you while I'm here. But I did find that the smaller I did it, the less overwhelming it felt. So
Yeah.
people would see the pictures and imagine this huge journal, but really it's this little tiny little notebook. So I don't
And
know if you found
and
this.
and and the great thing about this as well is because it's so filled, because it's full of text, full of type, you don't like small mistakes or even big mistakes aren't really visible because, and I think Lauren Hum said that it distracts you from like just the perfection.
Yeah,
And so
I've said that too. It's like as soon as
yeah,
you fill a page with a lot of stuff, it just looks so cool no matter what you do. Like people,
exactly,
it just shocks the pants off of people as soon as they see that much stuff on one page.
exactly.
That's not to say that it's not amazing, but it just when you put it all together, it feels like it would be more overwhelming, but it's less, if that makes sense. So I'm going to open up this chat to questions. We'll do kind of like a rapid fire Q&A here because I'm sure people have a couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
And there actually was one, I got to scroll back down to it now. Someone was asking about your grids and your grid builder. So can you kind of explain what the difference between those are?
Mm-hmm. So the grids, the composition grids are pre-composed grids. So it's a bundle of 25, and the 30 days about layering has like 30. They're all pre-composed. So they're this whole piece. The first thing that I showed you guys, the shapes that I've already made. So you only have to fill it out. You don't have to come up with something. You just have to fill those out. It's super easy and helps you to, whenever you drawing a blank, whenever you have one of those days where you're like, oh, I'm out of time, like I want to draw something, but like the composition itself usually, like unless the composition is great, you usually don't want to do something, and that those grids, composition grids, helps you a lot to just focus on creating, on pushing something out. So you only have to fill those out, and then you can start tweaking. So as soon as you're in it, it's kind of like putting on your jogging shoes. As soon as you've put on your jogging shoes, you're outside and you're starting to run like the 5 first minutes, then it's unlikely you're gonna get out again and then like go back in. But it takes sometimes so much to actually put on those shoes and to actually go out for a run. Um, but as soon as you do it, that's when you go, well, that's when it's useful. And just filling those out, it's kind of this booster that helps you to already be outside and to already be running for 5 minutes just by filling this one out. And then from there on, you can go on or you can just stop. Doesn't matter.
So those pre-built grids, are those in PDF format, or how do they work? Are they compatible
So
with Procreate
they
or?
they come in Procreate format. They come even as Procreate brushes, so you don't have to actually only import that like the file, but you can really click on it, make it bigger. They come as Photoshop files. They come as PNGs, PDFs, and JPEGs. So there's pretty much anything for everything. You can use them in PowerPoint if you don't have Photoshop. You can, and then print them out. You can, I don't know.
Okay, and then the grid builder, how is that different?
So the grid builder is actually it's the dissected pre-composed grid. So it's all these shapes you would see, like ovals, like the pyramid, or the long squares, and all that. And it's really helpful in that sense because you can just build your own grid. So for me, it usually starts off with like sketching out a word or two, and you can see that on my feed. There's a post that I made where it's like start creating today, and there I actually show you how to like I just sketch it out, and then I use the grid builder to create me a grid, and that one helps you to just finish off a piece or even just like create your own grids of sorts. So you can, like, if you have less words or something, like a grid that I haven't made yet, this one will actually help you to create something easier and faster. So it's a great way to, like, the next step, like the first step, if you're a beginner or if you're just someone sometimes lazy, like I'm lazy as well. And it just really helps me just to focus on, like, I want to create something today, and I don't want to spend hours and hours on figuring out a composition. Like I'll just browse through my composition grids. If I have created something my own, I have sketched something out, then I can use the grid builder to create that grid for that. So it's great. So you start to think of it your own, and you kind of create your own recipe. And then lastly, it's like, I don't know. I'd still probably use one of those two products anytime. But you can do it without. You can also just sketch it out, create it yourself, whatever is easier for you. And I think it
And,
comes from practice that you'll just get better over time.
and you said the grid builder is just for Procreate?
Yes, and Photoshop and Illustrator. So you can
Okay.
still use it on all these apps. I think Ian has even made it possible to use it on different apps as well, like Sketch Pro or something like that. So
Okay.
a lot of possible usage.
A lot of options for anyone
Yeah,
here. Okay, cool. So we have one really good, I think, final question that will cap this whole thing off. You might have to think
awesome.
about it for a second. Someone asked, what assignment would you give to someone who wants to start making different, they said fonts, but I'm going to say styles.
Mhm. Well, I think it's correct if we say fonts, because fonts are like, it's what they are, but fonts is usually a whole collection of letters. So styles is also really correct. What I would say is like really try to copy and learn. Do that step. Like search for fonts that you find cool, for styles that you love. Like I showed you at the beginning, it's the E that I love with that toothpaste top. That that's kind of what makes me think about it, and it helps me to remind myself, like if I want to recreate that, like right now I only have to think about that toothpaste top, and I kind of know like, oh yeah, and I see how the rest of the letter goes. And
Do you look for your inspiration on styles like that on Pinterest, you said, or do you have like I know there are font databases that you can go and look for inspiration on stuff like that. Do you use any of those?
I don't,
Okay.
and I'll tell you why I don't use them. Because the next exercise, when in my course, and I have a whole online course with Amanda, on like creating all these different type of fonts. So I'm giving you like a little snippet of that. It's what I love to do, and that's the part of the exercise. It's like you look at one letter, and then you try to imagine all the rest of the letters. So if you only have a word, you have to come up with the rest of the word in pretty much the same style. So to nail that style, you kind of have to figure out all these elements, and then figure out like how could you build the rest of the alphabet. If you have a whole font, then you can just like type it out and you don't really have to think about it. So you just copy it. But if you have like a word, like for example, things, and that's the word you have a beautiful T, you have a H, and all that. But then the thing to go back at it again and then say like, how can I write something else? Like for example, test, and I'm missing like an E and a small letter, small cap T. So that's where the challenge comes in, and then you have to figure out how it works. And that's the best way to learn actual new font, is to come up with letters that aren't written in it and see how you can match that as good as you can. And so that's why this exercise is pretty cool. And that's where I feel like you learn the most, is when you try to do that. And as soon as you do that, the more you'll learn about the ingredients of of an alphabet, and that's like, you'll build up that font library. You won't memorize like a whole alphabet, but you'll learn like, just what do I need to save up in my mind, and what do I don't like, what can I let I go. And so that's
So,
where, yeah.
so I sort of interrupted you when you were talking about what the assignment would be, but it kind of sounds like that's what your assignment would be.
Yeah, it
So,
is.
so find a word or a couple letters of a style and use your brain to recreate
Yeah.
the rest.
So for example, you can go on my Pinterest, you can go check that out, and then go to that Emma, you can see like the E. I love that E, and I told you guys I didn't like the rest of it, so I would probably change that, but I would have to try to match it to the first E, the capital E, and see if I can create the rest of the alphabet with that. Maybe I'll be inspired by the M and the A, because that the more letters you have, the better sense of a style of the font you'll have. Um, but yeah, you still have to come up with that on your own. And so as an assignment, go out and yeah, see like like get inspired, look for inspiration, save that somewhere, then look for one letter or the word, and then try to rewrite a different word with the same style, making it look like it would match, like if it was in a sentence or in a line that would work perfectly together. And then finally, well, see what you've learned from that, and then try to create something yourself and add something to that font style. And there you go. You've gone through all the 4 steps: inspiration, copy and learn, create, and one more step.
Yeah, so if anyone is watching this and actually wants to take Stefan up on that challenge, I think you should do it and tag him. So I'm going to put your Instagram handle back up here, but is there anywhere else that is better for people to reach you? So I've got your Instagram, I've put your website up there. Where else would you want to send people, if any?
If any, well, those are pretty much the main. Like, I have a few YouTube sites, and I have, like, if you go on my Instagram, on my link, like I have a link tree, you'll find all the links on there that you can like learn more about me and see what, like, kind of what you need to know, from YouTube to courses to book to, I don't know, contact.
Everything, the whole repertoire.
The whole repertoire.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here. That was awesome. People are really commenting up a storm in there about how much they enjoyed that. So I think it was super helpful for people.
Awesome.
And this will be available on YouTube for replay too, for anyone who couldn't catch the whole video. But yeah, any final words, Stefan? I think I know what your final words might be.
Well, yeah, create something today, even if it sucks.
Yeah.
I was sure that was coming up. No, well, I'm already in Tuesday, so you guys are ending up on Monday. I can tell you guys Tuesday is looking good. So no, be excited. Create something today, even if it sucks. It really doesn't mean that if you're tired or if you're exhausted that you still should create. That's really important to me. That's why I really don't want people to think it's create every day. But challenge yourself in giving yourself an amount of time that you want to create something. It gives you also a really good sense of how much you love doing what you do. Because if you do it only 5 minutes a day, it's always this dream that you project. But if you do that for 30 days is a really good amount and a long amount to actually pull through. So you can start with 10 or 15. But yeah, helping that will also really push you and propel you into a next level of creativity, of skills and craft, and creating something today, even if it sucks. Really, don't seek perfection. Don't let you limit yourself by your expectations and what you cannot achieve, because I'm probably the best example of, if you do something long enough, you really can become good at it. And it's not like I wasn't born with the ability to draw letters perfectly, and I'm not the best person to do it, but I was one of the person who was willing to pull through over a long period of time, always adding one more step, always trying to add something and make it interesting. And it's just amazing to see that right now, nowadays, with Instagram, with whole social media, you can do whatever you want. You can pursue your hobbies, whatever you love doing, and make a living out of that. So, and the doors that have been opened to me, it's just incredible. I'm excited for what's to come, and I'm excited for what's to come for you, Rebecca. And the best, only the best. And yeah, I believe that if it's a dream for you guys to create, I hate for people to say, like, I wish I could do this full time. Like, there usually is a way, and yeah, it's tools are out there, you can do that. And I'm excited to see more people follow their passion, their dream, and creating some amazing things. So yeah.
Me too. Love it. The whole conversation was so good. So many nuggets in there. And this will be a blog post too later. So for anybody whose mind has been totally blown, it'll all be on paper later too. So thanks again for being here. And yeah, I'll let you know when everything's posted and we can share the heck out of this.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll talk to you
guys.
Have a good rest of your entire day.
Thank you.
Okay, see ya.